U.S. military planners are making preparations for our troops to stay in Central Asia for a long time. A long time could mean 50 years. We've been in Korea for that long, and we have been in Japan and Europe even longer. But the time will come when we will wear out our welcome and have to leave these areas. The Vietnam met with more resistance, and we left relatively quickly in a humiliating defeat. Similarly, episodes of a more minor nature occurred in Somalia and Lebanon. Why look for more of these kinds of problems when it does not serve our interests? Jeopardizing our security violates the spirit of the Constitution and inevitably costs us more than we can afford. Our permanent air bases built in Saudi Arabia are totally unessential to our security, contributed to the turmoil in the Middle East, and they continue to do so. We're building a giant new air base in Kyrgyzstan, a country once part of the Soviet Union and close to Russia. China, also a neighbor with whom we eagerly seek a close relationship as a trading partner, will not ignore our military buildup in that region. Islamic fundamentalists may overthrow the current government of Saudi Arabia, a fear that drives her to cooperate openly with the terrorists while flaunting her relationship with the United States. The Wall Street Journal has editorialized that the solution to this ought to be our forcibly seizing the Saudi Arabian oil fields and replacing the current government with an even more pro-Western government. All along, I thought we condemned regimes that took over their neighbors' oil fields. The editorial, unbelievably explicit, concluded by saying, quote, "Finally, we must be prepared to seize the Saudi oil fields and administer them for the greater good." The greater good? I just wonder who they're referring to when they talk about the greater good. If the jingoism of the Wall Street Journal prevails and the warmongers in the Congress and the administration carry the day, we can assume with certainty that these efforts being made will precipitate an uncontrollable breakout of hostilities in the region that could lead to World War III. How a major publication can actually print an article that openly supports such aggression as a serious proposal is difficult to comprehend. Two countries armed with nuclear weapons on the verge of war in the region, and we're being urged to dig a deeper hole for ourselves by seizing the Saudi oil fields. Already the presence of our troops in the Muslim holy land of Saudi Arabia has inflamed the hatred that drove the terrorists to carry out their tragic act of 9/11. Pursuing such an aggressive policy would only further undermine our ability to defend the American people and will compound the economic problems we face here at home. Something, anything, regardless of its effectiveness, had to be done, since the American people expected it and Congress and the administration willed it. An effort to get the terrorists and their supporters is obviously in order, and hopefully that has been achieved. But a never-ending commitment to end all terrorism throughout the world, whether it is related to September 11th or not, is neither a legitimate nor a wise policy. H.J. Res 64 gives the President authority to pursue only those guilty of the attack on us, not every terrorist in the entire world. Let there be no doubt, for every terrorist identified, others will see only a freedom fighter. That was the case when we aided Osama bin Laden in the 1980s. He was a member of the Mujahideen, and they were the freedom fighters waging a just war against the Soviet army. And of course now, he is our vowed enemy. A broad definition of terrorism outside the understanding of those who attack the United States opens a Pandora's box in our foreign policy commitments. If we concentrate on searching for all terrorists throughout the world and bombing dozens of countries, but forget to deal with the important contributing factors that drove those who killed our fellow citizens, we will only make ourselves more vulnerable to new attacks. How can we forever fail to address the provocative nature of U.S. taxpayers' money being used to suppress and kill Palestinians and ignore the affront to the Islamic people that our military presence on their holy land of Saudi Arabia causes? Not to mention the persistent bombing of Iraq. I'm fearful that an unlimited worldwide war against all terrorism will distract from the serious considerations that must be given to our policy of foreign interventionism, driven by the powerful commercial interests and a desire to promote world government. This is done while ignoring our principal responsibility of protecting national security and liberty here at home. There is a serious problem with a policy that has allowed a successful attack of our homeland. It cannot be written off as a result of irrational yet efficient evildoers who are merely jealous of our success and despise our freedoms. We've had enemies throughout our history, but never before have we suffered such an attack that has made us feel so vulnerable. The cause of this crisis is much more profound and requires looking inwardly as well as outwardly at our own policies as well as those of others. The founders of this country were precise in their beliefs regarding foreign policy. Our Constitution reflects these beliefs, and all our early presidents endorsed these views. It was not until the 20th century that our nation went off to faraway places looking for dragons to slay. This past century reflects the new and less traditional American policy of foreign interventionism. Our economic and military power, a result of our domestic freedoms, has permitted us to survive and even thrive while dangerously expanding our worldwide influence. There's no historic precedent that such a policy can be continued forever. All empires and great nations throughout all history have ended when they stretched their commitments overseas too far and abused their financial system at home. The overcommitment of a country's military forces when forced with budgetary constraints can only lead to a lower standard of living for its citizens. That has already started to happen here in the United States. Who today is confident that government and our private retirement systems are sound and the benefits guaranteed? The unfortunate complicating factor that all great powers suffer is the buildup of animosity toward the nation currently at the top of the heap, which is aggravated by arrogance and domination over the weaker nations. We are beginning to see this, and the Wall Street Journal's editorial clearly symbolizes this arrogance. The traditional American foreign policy of the founders and our presidents for the first 145 years of our history entailed 3 points. 1, friendship with all nations desiring of such. 2, as much free trade and travel with those countries as possible. And 3, the most important, avoiding entangling alliances. This is good advice, and it still is. The framers also understood that the important powers for dealing with other countries and the issue of war were to be placed in the hands of the Congress. This principle has essentially been forgotten. The executive branch now has much more power than does the Congress. Congress continues to allow its authority to be transferred to the executive branch, as well as to the international agencies such as the UN, NAFTA, IMF, and the WTO. Through executive orders, our presidents routinely use powers once jealously guarded and held by the Congress. Today, through altering aid and sanctions, we buy and sell our friendship with all kinds of threats and bribes in our effort to spread our influence around the world. To most people in Washington, free trade means internationally managed trade with subsidies and supports for the WTO, where influential corporations can seek sanctions against their competitors. Our alliances, too numerous to count, have committed our dollars and our troops to such an extent that under today's circumstances, there's not a border war or civil disturbance in the world in which we do not have a stake. And more than likely, we have a stake, foreign aid, in both sides of each military conflict. After the demise of our nemesis, the Soviet Union, many believed that we could safely withdraw from some of our worldwide commitments. It was hoped that we would start minding our own business, save some money, and reduce the threat to our military personnel. But the opposite has happened. Without any international competition for superpower status, our commitments have grown and spread so that today we provide better military protection to Taiwan and South Korea and Saudi Arabia than we do for our own cities like New York and Washington. I am certain that national security and defense of our own cities can never be adequately provided unless we reconsider our policy of foreign interventionism. Conventional wisdom in Washington today is that we have no choice but to play the role of the world's only superpower, Recently, we had to cancel flights of our own Air Force over our cities because of spending restraints. And we rely on foreign AWACS planes to fly over to protect our airspaces. The American people are not in sync with the assumption that we must commit ourselves endlessly to being the world's policeman. If we do not wisely step back and reassess our worldwide commitments and our endless entanglements as we march toward world government, economic law will one day force us to do so anyway under very undesirable circumstances. In the meantime, we can expect plenty more military confrontations around the world while becoming even more vulnerable to attack by terrorists here at home. A constitutional policy in foreign relations of non-intervention is the policy that will provide America the greatest and the best national defense. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time.